Who's gonna cast the first stone? It's my body and my body's nobody's business but my own. Nobody's business but my own.
Hi, my name is Carol Downer, and I have a website called Women's Health in Women's Hands.org. This website sort of summarizes about 40 years of our history in the women's health movement, which I want to tell you about. This got started in California right before Roe v. Wade. I mean, when I say right before, about a year before. And at that time, abortion was hard to get in California, even though it had been legalized. But it had to be done in an accredited hospital, and most hospitals, as today, didn't want to touch abortion, okay? That's a lesson for us all to learn. Hospitals, in general, don't like to mess with abortion. So at that time, we were thinking about learning how to do it ourselves. We had become acquainted with an illegal abortionist in West Hollywood, and he was kind of a laid-back guy, you know, sexual revolution kind of guy. And he said it was okay if we came and hung out and learned how to do abortion. Of course, he never said he was going to teach us, which he didn't. He didn't give us a minute of his time, really. But he did allow us to hang out, which I and several other women did. And one day, and by the way, he was using a device to do this abortion. These were early abortions, which, just pretend like this isn't here. It just consisted of this syringe right here, 50 cc syringe, and that shoots out through this flexible cannula. Now, he was using a cannula that was a little bigger. This is a 4 millimeter, and he was using like an 8 millimeter cannula. But not that big, and it was pretty flexible. And he was able to complete these abortions within, you know, a relatively short period of time. And he had no problems. And we could see it was a very safe, simple procedure. So one day, when I was there waiting to get in and see how this was done, I mean, I had the method demonstrated just as I'm showing it to you, but I hadn't actually seen it happen. I went in, following my friend, into a little room, and believe me, it was a small room. With his illegal clinic was right next to the Christian Science reading room on Santa Monica Boulevard, across the street from the coffee shop. And it was just like a shotgun kind of thing, living room, you know, the front room and the middle room and the back. And that little exam room was, you know, very tiny. At any rate, I followed her, and there was a very young woman on the table getting an IUD. And she was lying on the table with her legs open, facing me and the doctor. He had the speculum in. And the light was over his shoulder, flashing, you know, down on her vagina. And I saw her cervix. And I was just absolutely amazed. It was, first of all, it was so close. It was only a few inches from the opening. And secondly, it was very simple and beautiful, bright pink, healthy pink, like a little donut with a little hole in the middle. And that's where the IUD was going to go in. Well, I literally, my knees buckled. I was that awestruck. And I realized that if we knew how simple and easy it was to do abortions, why would there be 5,000 women a year in the United States dying from illegal abortions at that time? Why were we sticking knitting needles inside ourselves? You know, why were we going to cranks or acids? I mean, all kinds of falling downstairs, kicking, having somebody kick us in the stomach, all that kind of stuff. So I couldn't wait to get out and share this with other people and to say we just got to do this. And fortunately, we did get a few more women, and we wanted to start our own clinic. The abortionist had been arrested, and we were raising money for him, and we just thought it was high time that women not be, just always there with a male savior. We thought it's time for us to do this. So I went in on the Saturdays, and my husband took care of the kids. He took them to the beach while I went in and with my friends. So we had our first meeting, our larger meeting, in Venice at the Every Woman's Bookstore. Now, the Every Woman's Bookstore is not there today, but it was quite a gathering place. And we had about 30 women show up, and we had put out kind of an enigmatic little notice, but if you read it, you kind of got the message that we were going to talk about learning how to do something directly. So everyone was waiting, and our little group took turns talking about the different aspects. So my role was to do what I just did here, which was to show this equipment to them and describe to them how the abortion was going to go. Well, you should have seen the expressions on these women's faces. I mean, they were just pale, they were in agony. They were upset. They could, the whole subject was just scary to them. And I could see that until I demystified this for them, they were going to keep on thinking that abortion was this thing that you mostly would die of. So I invited them into the next room where there was a desk, and I cleared the things off. At that day, I happened to be wearing a very long dress, and I wasn't wearing any panties, so I just lay back on the table using the dress as my pad, and pull back, put in the speculum, and as we had learned to do in the clinic, and handed around a flashlight. Well, first everybody was kind of standing back a few feet in kind of a semicircle, and I thought, oh, they're going to think I'm an exhibitionist, or I don't know what they're going to think. But I did it, and as a matter of fact, they loved it. They all came close. They crowded in. They took turns looking, and everyone had, a comment and a question, and we talked. And in that one short evening, we knocked in the head so many old doctors' tales, Like I had a tipped uterus, and I said, oh yes, that means it lies kind of in the back of my cavity there. When you look in, you don't see it head on, it kind of falls back. The doctor told me that's why I get pregnant so easily, because I had 6 children at this time. And so it seemed like, well, something might be going on like that. A little later in the evening, another woman put hers in, and her uterus tipped upwards. When you looked in, it kind of pointed up. And she said, yeah, the doctor told me that's why I got pregnant so easily. Well, we just laughed our heads off because we realized that these doctors don't know what they're talking about. I mean, we learned the difference between a secretion and a discharge. We found out that, yes, if we have a vaginal infection, there's going to be a discharge. On the other hand, if we're normal and we're ovulating, we are going to be having secretions throughout the month that vary and tell us where we are in our menstrual cycle. So we just learned a huge amount, and we decided, especially since abortion was becoming more available in California at that time, especially in Los Angeles, that numerous small hospitals were offering them. We decided that our time was better spent introducing women to our own bodies, and we called it the Self-Help Clinic. Over a period of years, and today there are still women's clinics. They're still that started with the self-help principle in the Seattle, Atlanta, Northern California are all clinics that were started by women who learned how to provide abortion. And when Roe v. Wade were the first ones to open up women-controlled clinics. Also, women have used the same techniques to learn how to be midwives. The group of lay midwives were arrested up in Santa Cruz in 1974, and because that was also practicing medicine without a license. Oh, I forgot to say I got arrested doing this. I forgot about that. They did a observation of us, and it turned out that this one presentation that I gave, in which to a little group of young women, I talked to them about yeast condition, and the woman that was showing her cervix for that day, our staff person, happened to have a yeast condition at that time, and she'd gone across the street and bought some yogurt and asked me if I would please put it in, because that's a remedy that we had learned in their, talking to women across the country. So, based on this woman's report, who turned out to be an ex-nun, I was arrested and put on trial. We successfully fought it. We went right to trial, and the jury acquitted me, and at the end, the lead juror gave me a card that said, "Carol Downer, you are an upper." So that is kind of by way of self-introduction, but I do want to very quickly say that it also led to the development of a technique developed by Lorraine Rothman, who came to that first meeting at the Venice bookstore, went home and developed a prototype and she called it Adelum. And very, very quickly, it consists of a collection jar so that when you pump, the material goes into the jar. It's slower, but for us, in minimally trained women who were just learning through doing self-examination with each other, it was far safer. Because the other device that I showed you, that the illegal abortionist used, he used it, maybe 10, even 20 times a day. So therefore, he had become very adept, very proficient. Now, in our case, we were not doing that. So we had to divide the job up, and this let us do it. One person, one woman, very gingerly put in a sterilized cannula, being careful not to touch the vaginal walls into the cervix, until the woman, who had no anesthesia and was comfortable because we didn't use a big, blunt, wide instrument, said, "Well, I can feel it at the back wall." And then another woman then would use the syringe. Now, Lorraine added a feature called a one-way valve so that the air would always come in this direction and never go back. Maybe you can even hear it hiss out. And there was another woman in our group who would be by the woman, explaining to her as it went along helping her to see the tube. And we didn't know whether it was an abortion or not, although we did do uterine size checks on each other to make sure that it wasn't too far along. And this was, up to 6 or 8 weeks. This was very adequate. After the procedure, or even as it was proceeding, though, we soon realized if it was an abortion because the material would be clumpy and watery, whereas if it was our plain old menstrual period, which is what we did to learn how to do the procedure, that was our technique of learning and also demonstrating, the material would just creep out. It would take ages to get it out. And when it came out, we would dump it into a bowl of cold water, and it would just circle around like little spaghettis of, red. Now that's just a very, very quick introduction to, a very dynamic women's health movement that has written books, established clinics, developed new techniques, belonged to national organizations, testified, organized, gone around the world, but just to give you an idea of what women can do when we break down those barriers and work with each other and share, it just liberates all kinds of energy.